I don't see any energy in the room. Hello, everyone. It's not loud enough. Hello, everyone. It's much better. All right. So, the topic of my talk is that public opinion is the new superpower. But we all kind of know that public opinion has been playing a major role in the way conversations are happening in the news media, in the way decisions are being taken by the decision makers, and so much more. There was a time when social media was not even around. We did not even know that Facebook existed. Those were dark past days of Orkut, and everybody was happily writing on each other's scrapbooks on Orkut. But then a big revolution came about. Facebook came around, Twitter came around, and suddenly public opinion became this really important thing that everybody wanted to tap into. Be it politicians, be it institutions, organizations, non-profit organizations, social good organizations, and a lot more, even extremist organizations. Everybody wanted to tap into public opinion, wanted to change that public opinion. And in 2008, I started Youth Ki Awaaz, and I was 17 at that time, and I was just done with my school. And I realized that as somebody who's 17, who is just out of school, who's still trying to figure out what to do ahead in life, what course to take up, what kind of education to get, it was big realization that as somebody who's 17, my opinions, my ideas, my solutions to the world's problems actually matter. I mean, at 17, all that we're told is that just study, just focus on your career, get a good degree, get a good course, just get good marks in your board exams and whatever exams you're giving, and just get a good life. You can always opinionate later. You can always pursue entrepreneurship later. You can always take risks later. We're never actually told that if you're 16, 17, 15, 14, 10, it doesn't matter. If you want to break the status quo, break it. Ask questions, take risks, fail, and get up again, and fail again. And keep failing till you actually succeed. We're never told that, never ever. And the matter is so bad that forever when young people are, when we are all growing up, when young people are being raised, especially in a country like India, we're all always constantly extremely protected. Protected against our own opinions, our own views, our own questions. So, a few years ago, talking about gender-based violence or rapes was a taboo topic. Talking about menstruation was a big issue. You could not go and openly talk about it. You could not break taboos around menstruation. You could not about 100 other issues. But things changed slowly and steadily. So when I was 17, I realized that as somebody who's young, who comes from a fairly privileged background, who comes from a well-educated background, my own opinions don't matter. And this is both at a family level and at the parliamentary, the political level. How many family decisions are actually taken while keeping the young people in mind? Very few. So when I realized this, I had been blogging for a really long time. How many of you know what a blog is? Great. How many of you have actually tried blogging? So the ones who've tried blogging actually know how difficult it is to get readers, right? It's like a pain. You call your friends and you ask them to read your blog, and you ask them to drop a comment because you've actually written something and you're excited. So I did the same when I was 17. And I would write my opinions on these really important issues like global warming, and I would call up my friends and tell them, hey, listen, I've written this blog about global warming, why don't you go and comment? And they would go and they would write a comment like nice or well done. And I mean, that was the level of engagement that they really had with an issue like global warming. And that actually sounds funny, but it made me realize that it's the culture of speaking up or the culture of raising your voice does not really exist. And slowly and steadily I started realizing that this blog that I had started called Youth Ki Awaaz had to play a more important role in this entire scenario. I wanted to build it up. I wanted to help more and more people raise their voice. And one of the biggest realizations I had was that I, as I said, came from a fairly privileged background. I had access to internet. I had access to a mobile phone when I was 16. But there are so many young people in the country who don't. And the least we can do is actually get their voices and make them reach to a larger audience, right? So that's when I realized that, youth kiosk had to be something bigger than just a personal blog. And as the people who raised their hands about blogging know, it was very difficult to get readers. So the first few years, I think the first month or so, my mother was the only one reading the blog. And that too, I would force her to just sit down and read this article that I've written. A few friends started, reading Youth Ki Awaaz. And, that also helped me realize that I want to study journalism. I want to know how the media works, I want to know how news works, because I really want to have an impact on the way people consume information. And, the media or the news in any country plays a very big role in this. I mean, they are the ones who relay all this information out to the public. And I believed that journalism in its current form could change the world, and I was wrong. But we'll talk about that later. So Youth Kiosk helped me decide that I wanted to study journalism, so I studied journalism. I worked with some of the greatest organizations that there are today, in the country. And, very soon I realized that the way the mainstream media is working is very bureaucratic. Issues from the ground do not actually reach the people. There are journalists who keep running around in rural, semi-urban areas, trying to get basic issues like sanitation, out there, and they're not able to because it's not newsy enough. It's not newsworthy. It's not something that will really get the TRPs or the viewership. People want to sell Bollywood and sports, and that's it. That's what gets everybody the readers and viewers. So, so I quit my job. I realized that it's not worth it. Just doing something that's really not having impact, and I went full time with Youth Ki Awaaz. And it was an online initiative. It was a blog. It still is a website. And the biggest question we always got was, whenever I would go to meet sponsors or potential partners, the biggest question was, how can something that's purely online actually have on-ground impact? And that's a question that everybody asks. How can a digital media platform actually change the life of the last person out there? And that was the biggest criticism for us for the longest, that I remember. But I kept at it. All the cynics were there. All people criticized. My friends also kind of took a back seat. They were like, what, you do this blog business. We don't believe in all of this. It's just purely online. It's not worth it. But some people did stick on. Some people did contribute continuously. I got a few friends involved. More and more people started seeing. In 2010, one of our readers actually, wrote an email to me saying that, I have this big issue that I'm facing, and I want to write about it on your website. So I said, sure, why not? And I realized that, Youth Ki Awaaz could be something more than just my personal blog. So more and more people started writing on YKA. And in 2010, I also realized that one of the biggest reasons why young people don't speak up is because, as I said, we're all born and brought up in a culture of silence. We're never told to raise our voice. We're never told to question the status quo. And it's a norm for us to not speak up. It's very normal. Like we don't bother to intervene in issues we see around us because it is what the normative stance is. We see people fighting on the streets. We don't want to intervene. We see domestic violence happening in our apartment complex. We don't want to actually intervene because we know it's none of our business. That's what we've been told forever. And one of the ways that I thought of approaching this was by launching a program that could actually help people learn how to write better and address these issues better. So we launched in 2010. I remember we had about 1,000 readers a month. And I thought that, we have 1,000 readers, people actually do want to engage. We launched this program and about 20 will apply. Me and my friend, who were the editors, we'll take about 5 each and we'll train about 10. We picky, we select and all of that. And we launched the program and only 2 people applied. And we did not really have an option. We took both of them and we trained them really well. We did the best we could. And from that date, the program built on. And I think since 2010, when it started till right now, we've trained about 3,000 people. In the second or third batch itself, we got about 300 applications for the internship. And right now, it's a 2-week program, runs every 2 weeks. Right now, we're getting anything between 800 to 1,000 applications, and we select only 15 people for the program. But there was a big point that came in that actually proved that something that you're doing online, as basic as running a website, can actually have on-ground impact. And that was 2011. 2011 was a big year for the world for many reasons. One of them was that there was a massive social media boom. Can anybody tell me why 2011 was a big year? Exactly, the Arab Spring. There was a big crisis in the Middle East, and things just went crazy. There were civil wars happening across Middle East, and we were actively covering all of that. But a reader of Kieva's, his name is Pranay, his blog is up on the website. He wrote to us saying that his father, at that time, at the time of the civil war, was working in Tripoli, in Libya. And he wrote to us saying that, he's been working there for the last 4 years. There is a war going on. There is no way for him to reach out to his father. And the last thing he had heard from his father was his father telling him that he doesn't know whether he'll survive or not. And there was no initiative at that time by the government to actually get the citizens back. The US had sent their ships and planes to get their citizens. So did many other countries. But India was trying to save some geopolitical relationships with a country that was pretty much being torn down. And they did not send the ships and planes. So at that time, we did not have a lot of audience. But, I did not have a lot of connections in the mainstream media. He wanted to reach out to mainstream television channels. But what I did was I told him that, to write about it, and we'll publish it on Youth Kievas, and we'll see what happens after that. So he wrote about it. He lives in London, so he wrote about it. And I remember it was around 2 a.m. in the morning, and I get a call from my colleague saying that, you know what, you need to wake up right now, our servers have crashed. So I log on to the website, and I see there are about 500,000 people on the website, 5 lakh people on the website at that time trying to read Pranay's. And it had gone completely viral. It was shared over 60, 70,000 times on social media. Most of the mainstream organizations were talking about it. And we got a call from CNN, IBN the very next day, the next morning, saying that, we want to get this up on our news channel. We want to have Pranay's story out there at the 9 p.m. show. So we put them in touch with Pranay. We worked very actively with them, with a lot of other media organizations to get Pranay's story out. And by the end of the day, there was so much public pressure built on the government that they had to pass the order to get the citizens back. And within 2 days of that, not only was Pranay's father back, but 16,000 Indians came back because of that one story and the amount of public pressure that it built. And for us, for a lot of us, for a lot of our readers, for a lot of our skeptics, that was the moment that decided that just sharing a story or an opinion can really have a big impact. And since then, multiple such stories took on Youth Kievas. I remember another very recent case that happened in 2012, sorry, which was that a college in somewhere in South had these absurd rules when it came to the female students on campus. They couldn't exit their dorm rooms after 6 p.m. They were not allowed to study with male students on campus after a time. Just absurd rules. And one of those students actually took the initiative of surveying the entire hostel and finding out whether other students thought that these rules were very insensitive, and they built a lot of they created a lot of problems for the students. And 80% of the students actually agreed with her. So she went to her dean and she said that this is an issue that I've discovered. Why don't we work on it? And the dean said, you're suspended. And she was suspended for 15 days. And the reason given to her was that she was building dissent in college. And her professor who supported her was fired from the university. He started a petition on change.org, which did not catch up at all. It had about 200 or 250 signatures. And that was when we discovered that story. And we got Spandana, who was the girl, to write about it on Youth Kieva. So she did. And the very next day, we get a call from this university saying that, we'll file a defamation case against you if you don't take it down. So we didn't respond to that. We got Spandana to actually write about that as well. So she wrote about how, how we got a call and how the university is going crazy. They did it again and we wrote about it again. The more that they were trying to actually suppress her, we were just making all the information public. At some point, it was a week-long fight that we put up. At some point in that week, we decided that, there is a public phone number of that university available. And we have a big audience. By that time, we had about 1 million people who were visiting the website every month. And we thought that we'll put the public number and request our audience to call the university and let them know that what they were doing was completely insensitive and wrong. And we wrote a message out there. We told our audience, we made it very simple. Call them and say this. And we thought that they'll get about 100, 200 calls that week. They got over 3,000 calls. And they just could not ignore it. I mean, there was no way for them to ignore it. They couldn't have disconnected their lines, and they couldn't have not heard what people were saying. And this was across the country. A college in South was getting calls from young women from colleges across India because they all felt they were in similar situations and they needed to find for somebody else who was in a similar situation. And the university had to give in. They called her back, they apologized, they gave her a written confirmation that they will work on making the rules better. And they did, they had to. And many such stories happened over the course of time. But the key really was here that there was enough public opinion built to get decision makers to take decisions in favor of people. And what we discovered, and the last takeaway that I want to tell all of you is that we are all, as I said, coming from a fairly privileged background. We all have access to the internet. We are all urban. We might not understand issues on ground as well as people who are facing it would. But if you look at the way the world works, it's fairly simple. There's the urban middle class. There are people who are at the bottom of the pyramid, and there are decision makers. What the urban middle class can really do is mobilize enough opinion to affect the people who are taking the decisions for the bottom of the pyramid. Because the people who are actually taking the decisions, be it anybody, any politician you talk about, anybody in a position of influence, they all talk to the urban middle class. The last elections, everybody was talking to the urban middle class. And that's the audience that we are, and we can really build public opinion to be the next superpower. Thank you.
tGELF, leading the change.